So, how did this crap show happen?
The world has changed because of what Trump has done. And the American people, including independents and some Republicans, know how bad he is, know how much he's misrepresented, know how he's getting close to getting us in a war. I said, as the walls close in on this man, I'm worried he's going to get us to war in Iran. Unfortunately, I may have been right.
The president also called on Iran not to retaliate, but they did anyway. What does that tell you?
Well, again, what it tells me, as I looked at last night, what it tells me is that we can make good on our commitment to defend Israel. It tells me that Israel does have superior military capability. Just think about the hardware that Iran threw into the sky and how little damage that caused. I mean, that's a real testament to how strong
the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
What is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President?
Really quick, before we get started, I want to go ahead and throw this out here. This is going to be kind of part one of a two-parter on this topic. And of course, I'm also recording this on a Monday where the landscaping thing is going on. So if you hear any noise in the background, I'm going to try to keep it to a very, very minimal because of obviously the timing of this video. I meant to get it out last night, but some things happened that quite frankly just kept me from being able to do it. But with that out of the way, let's think about this particular video from the perspective of what's probably going to happen and how we got here. And part two is going to be more about how it's going to be viewed for the rest of this year, because we're going to be talking about the political aspect more in that video, which by the way will come out on Thursday. As I've told you guys, the schedule's kind of changing. The longer takes will come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the normal takes will come out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With that out of the way, now let's get to it. There are so many bad takes here and so many old clips being resurfaced of somebody like, say, Biden saying Trump's going to get us into a war with Iran, even though it obviously occurred under his watch. You've also got Blinken, who we'll get to here in a second, talking about the funds that Iran was using. But of course, I'm not going to forget to mention the embassy bombing that occurred, which obviously prompted Iran to fire back. But then again, at the same time, though, as I'm showing you guys footage or additional footage of what happened in Israel the other night of the Iron Dome shooting down drones, and the U.S., of course, then turning around and saying afterwards that they also assisted in shooting down drones, even though that's this attack by Iran has, for the most part, been confirmed to be nothing more than a probing attack to see exactly how strong the Iron Dome was. I think it's time we have a conversation about what exactly happened and what's probably going to happen, and also at the same time, eradicate some of these very, very, very bad takes that are coming from both sides of the aisle. Well, the first take I want to go ahead and eradicate, because this right here is going to be the narrative that's going to be probably for the rest of the year, is that Trump is actually at fault for what happened in Iran. Trump has not been president since 2021. The pulling out of the Iran deal was a good idea. And then eventually you had the Abraham Accords, which, let me go ahead and remind you.
Remember a couple of important points here, which is that October 7th did not just happen because our enemies want to eliminate us from the face of the earth. October 7th also happened because Iran freaked out that Israel and Saudi Arabia were on the heels of a complete normalization. Make no mistake. The fact that countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia jumped in to intervene yesterday to help Israel against the monster that is Iran is a direct ripple effect of the Abraham Accords, which helped bring peace to the Middle East. So why is this not being highlighted more? Because the media wants to play down the fact that the Abraham Accords was a genius baby of the Trump administration, which stands in sharp contrast to Joe Biden's weak and frail foreign policy that got us into multiple wars in the last 4 years. Let's remember that on November 5th.
Granted, that right there is not me explaining it. Granted, that right there is somebody else who's explaining it. But obviously, Israel was able to defend themselves because Jordan and Saudi Arabia, due to the normalization agreements, they decided to open up the airspace to allow Israeli planes to go over. Now, Israel, or Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not this guy here who, for whatever reason, this where got posted saying this was the president of Israel, when in reality, the Calvin Coolidge Project would post the actual right photo. The president of Israel is actually Isaac Herzog, not Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the prime minister. Of course, if you ask Destiny, he'll tell you that Erdogan is, when obviously Erdogan is actually the leader of Turkey, not Israel. Still, at the same time, though, these very, very bad takes deserve to be smacked down, especially the one about Trump being at fault for what happened. These same people tried to spin what happened in Afghanistan as Trump's fault, even though what happened was that Biden moved the leaving date from May of 2021 to September. And of course, as you guys already know, the disaster, which was the Afghanistan pullout, that occurred under Biden's watch. This right here occurred under Biden's watch. And, of course, the United States under Biden, because Biden cares more about a very, very small patch of people who live in Michigan, is obviously saying, look, we're not going to go any further with this.
The U.S.'s current assessment as of tonight. I'm also told that the president told the prime minister that the U.S. is not going to participate in any offensive operations against Iran. So that's a really important note, given that we have seen the U.S. Obviously taking a lot of steps to come to Israel's defense and play a big role in helping to knock down some of those weapons that Iran launched against Israel. But this is where the U.S. is clearly drawing the line. The president saying anything offensive that might potentially take place from Israel against Iran, that the U.S. is not going to be involved in that.
Then again, though, at the same time, we should also not be surprised, given the fact that Biden announced that he was going to address the nation. And, of course, this clip right here has been circulating, and the Biden administration is trying to say that that was never what we were going to do. I call BS.
Just want to note that a short time ago, we had a graphic up earlier that said that President Joe Biden would be addressing the nation. That was an error. We just want to clarify that, and we regret that mistake. But I do want to go to MJ Lee.
I was listening to everything on Real American Politics, and apparently there were several tweets saying that Biden was going to address the nation. Then they put out tweets saying that Biden was going to address the nation from the Oval Office the very next day, only to then turn right back around and say we're not going to address the nation at all. Do you guys see exactly how piss poor of a leader we have? I mean, we need to know at least what the hell is going on. I mean, at least take a stand, take a side. That right there is what kind of is needed right now. Now, if you want to argue that we shouldn't get involved, that is fine. I don't think we should put boots on the ground either. If you want to argue that we should stop sending money to Israel, even though I, for the most part, still say that Israel is a friend of ours, and even though they have a very, very funny way of showing it, I'm still very, very much pro-Israel. I've explained that in other videos, and I've also explained that this entire situation could have been avoided if you just say put a carrier group somewhere out in the Mediterranean, so that way it would have deterred someone from like Iran from firing back, even though obviously the embassy bombing prompted a response from Iran. The point is this right here. If you had a carrier group out there, Iran probably would have been deterred from firing back, and the situation probably would have gotten smoothed over at a later date. But obviously, you've got people asking the question, are we going to be going to war? Is World War III about to happen? And my response to that is going to be very, very simply a telegraph of what I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in the video. I'm going to say no. Yes, I'm going to say no. The reason why I'm going to say no is because obviously this was a proxy fight, okay? This is probably what it's going to be. Iran, and of course now Russia, now they're saber rattling, which I also kind of find weird because the minute that Biden says don't attack Iran, Iran chooses to obviously attack Israel. Excuse me, that came out wrong. What I meant to say was the minute that Biden says don't attack, meaning Iran attack Israel, Iran turns right back around, spits in his face, and attacks. Which brings me to Blinken.
The argument that money is fungible. So Iran may have known this money is coming and used other funds to help fund this attack that happened.
Iran has unfortunately always used and focused its funds on supporting terrorism, on supporting groups like Hamas. And it's done that when there have been sanctions. It's done that when there haven't been sanctions. And it's always prioritized that.
I think the person who's really running the country is actually Anthony Blinken. That's who I think is really and truly actually running everything. This guy was a flunky from both the Bush and Obama days. I mean, his entire reputation, if you actually go through it, is actually pretty piss poor. And you would obviously see that we shouldn't be surprised this is happening under this guy's watch. Because let's be honest, we all know that old Joe's not really and truly taking care of what's actually going on in this country. A lot of people have assessed it's Obama, but of course, if you read the book Lucky, and of course I tend to believe that book, and I tend to believe all the other sources, they indicate that Obama does not have the power we thought he had, but of course the Obama flunkies from his administration, the staff workers, they're the ones who actually run the country. As you guys can see, obviously it's being ran to the ground. And U.S. foreign policy is obviously being ran to the ground too. Now, to those out there, and I want to go ahead and address this right now, about the whole Genocide Joe thing, because even at a Trump rally, the guy who actually addressed the nation during a rally about the situation.
Energy is our big problem.
Genocide Joe! Genocide Joe! Genocide Joe! Genocide Joe! Genocide Joe!
Obviously, the voters can see that this is a bunch of crap, meaning that Joe Biden obviously funding both sides here is what the hell got us into this. Look, you need to make a choice, okay? Which one are you going to support, Israel or Iran, or are you going to stay out of it altogether? Telling Israel to suddenly not fight back, which, by the way, Israel has traditionally always been a friend of the U.S., or we've always been friendly to them, telling them not to fight back and all kinds of other crazy stuff, that's not exactly the way you want to go about this. And personally, at this moment in time, I don't think that Netanyahu cares. So for the love of God, just put a carrier group out there in the middle of the Mediterranean Ocean, so that way no more of these attacks occur from other nations. Let Israel and Hamas just kind of fight it out. And don't worry, we'll get to that here in a second, because obviously more and more takes get thrown out there. Of course, you find out more and more information why it is that the crowd that's screaming for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, I'm showing you guys a nice little video here in the B-roll footage of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez voting to fund the Iron Dome and then crying, saying that she did not want to. Save us the BS, okay? I have been saying for a while that obviously being pro-Israel, I'm okay with sending more and more money to there for them to, or at least the Iron Dome. I'm not okay with sending troops or putting troops on the ground in that region, but I am okay with supporting the people the way we normally have been. But the point is this right here. We're now back at a stage, or now we're back at that stage where people are saying you're not allowed to defend yourself, or you shouldn't be allowed to defend yourself. We've talked about this on several occasions. We've talked about this in a few other videos, and now you've got the United States outright saying we're not going to get involved. Of course, Biden does this the sooner that Vladimir Putin shows up and says, look, you better not get involved in this, or else you may get retaliation from us, which should obviously tell you exactly how weak Joe Biden is. All the people who kept on saying that Trump was in bed, you know, with Putin and whatnot, obviously these people didn't have any sense. The truth be told is this right here. Vladimir Putin prefers the Democrat to be in office because the Democrats historically have always been terrible when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. I could give you an old book about all the screw-ups they've had. By the way, Republicans have screwed up on foreign policy too. But typically with Republican presidents, you typically tend to get somebody who does what I call behavioral correction. Or I'll let J.D. Vance explain.
Jake, the idea that Putin loves Donald Trump or Donald Trump loves Putin is absolutely absurd. Putin was actually pretty well behaved during the Trump administration. He invaded another country during the Biden administration. So for these guys to say that Putin prefers Donald Trump is completely ignores the underlying realities on the ground here. We actually had some real security deterrence when Donald Trump was president. And of course, it's not just in Ukraine. So again, what Fetterman's saying is preposterous. Reality shows Putin didn't like when Donald Trump was president and was a lot better behaved. And I think to accuse Donald Trump of being pro-Putin completely ignores the reality on the ground.
Well, former President Trump was a bull in a china shop. You couldn't tell what the hell he was going to do. He was extremely unpredictable. Richard Nixon had that quality too. Of course, Nixon would eventually get to taunt. And of course, there's also some things that Nixon did that I agree with, and some things that he did I did not agree with. But still, at the same time, he was unpredictable. So the reason why it was he was called Tricky Dick. Reagan, if you pissed him off, whether it be that day or a couple of days later, he would bomb the hell out of you shortly afterwards. W, for all of his faults, would invade you. Proved that with Iraq and Afghanistan. Obama, the most he did was send a flyby across North Korea and then tell them that they flew by him, and then told them that we have sea drones, which weren't even operational at that point in time. In the case of Trump, if you screwed around with him, you got the hell bombed out of you, or you got a general like, say, Soleimani killed. You see where I'm going with this? You see what I'm saying is this here. You don't have to put boots on the ground. So to the crowd who's on my side of the aisle who's screaming, oh my God, Joe's going to get us into a war because he wants to get reelected, I think you people need to be quiet. I honestly do. What's going on right now, and I'll talk more about this in Thursday's video because I'm obviously going to come back to this, and I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, this is going to be kind of a two-parter, is that Joe Biden is heightening the tension so that way he can turn right back around and say that he kept us out of a war. Yes, it sounds crazy, but obviously crazy scenarios and psyops do in fact occur. Like the other day when Jason Whitlock was talking about a psyop, they plan on replacing Biden, even though every opportunity in the world to replace him has pretty much for the most part passed them by. I don't see that happening. This right here is one of those cases where it is that these people are going to turn it back around and say, I kept you out of war, and I'm going to brag about it. If you know the MO of the Obama administration, if you know the MO of the Obama campaign from 2012, it's not that hard to see through. But still at the same time, though, that leaves us with this next round of takes, which of course also includes Hamas, the pro-ceasefire crowd. Pay attention.
You know, Hamas continues to expose the absolute hypocrisy and fecklessness of the American left. Can you imagine spending all of this time demanding a ceasefire from Israel, and when they offer one in exchange for hostages and Hamas rejects it, you continue to attack Israel? That is the American left. Definitely President Biden flip-flopping in his support for Israel in order to cater to 100,000 voters in Dearborn, Michigan, had a huge impact here and is conveying to Hamas that they are winning the war. And Rachel, the worst part about this is that Biden could end this in a second. You know how? There is one entity that Hamas listens to 100%, and it is Qatar. If Qatar said tomorrow, release the hostages, which include American citizens, they would release the hostages tomorrow. President Biden in 2021 made Qatar a major non-NATO ally. What has he done with the leverage he got out of that? Absolutely nothing. He's allowing these hostages to languish in captivity.
Yeah, God knows what kind of conditions they're in.
Yes, these people have rejected the terms of the ceasefire. We still have over 100 hostages in that area being held captive by Hamas. Reminds me of the Iranian hostage crisis where we had a bunch of Americans left overseas. This president has been an abject failure from start to finish. By the way, to the ceasefire crowd, why don't you guys push for like a treaty instead of a ceasefire? All right, just saying. Else too, I'm showing you guys some stuff here in the B-roll footage of our, let's just say our current military, which doesn't exactly look like a strong military. If somebody comes in here and says that this right here Sun Tzu appear to be weak, when you're actually strong, I don't buy that at all, especially given the social justice warrior curriculum that's being taught to the men at large. But the thing that really bothers me is how it is that this type of stuff actually gets out. As a guy who is a veteran, obviously we play pranks. Obviously we do very, very wild stuff from time to time in our downtime, but this fire is absolutely sick. I've talked this on several occasions. And then you get a take like this.
Powerful to me and something that I'm certainly proud of. And I was able to deploy on the USS Gerald R. Ford last fall, and the coolest thing I did on board was to be able to participate in a LGBTQ spoken word night, and I was able to read a poem that I wrote to...
Disgusting. And then you get somebody else who blatantly tells you why it is that Gen Z refuses to go to war.
Everybody's saying Gen Z is going to get drafted. Like, no the fuck we're not. And you know why I know that? Because we're just going to say no. Like, how are they going to actually force us to get up and go to war? I understand it was like that in like the 1940s. What else is there to do in 1940 besides shoot people? We have things to do nowadays. We have twerk, be bisexual, eat hot chip, lie. And we're also like really mentally ill. I have like 6 of these. What makes you think I'm qualified to have a gun? Like,
it's an old clip, and of course I've talked about the possibility of a draft, which I don't think will happen, but I do want to say this right now. It is possible, it's likely because of selective service. They can pull you out of that group. But let me say this right quick before I get to these very, very bad takes and tell you what I think is going to happen. The current crop of people that you would probably want to recruit from or draft, the military is not going to care about your 6 mental illnesses. All right, let me explain. I joined back in 2003. All right, when I joined the Marines in 2003. The military at the time's requirement was that you had a high school diploma. I had a GED. Now, a GED is pretty much the equivalence of a high school diploma, but the thing is, it's right here. Said GED was still viewed as a bit of a downgrade, but they took me anyway. I had to go through a process to get in. I had to go through a much, much more strenuous process to get in, write letters and all kinds of stuff because I was very, very determined to join the United States Marine Corps. Little did I know when I got in that guys had been taken in who had literal hernias. I'm not going to name any names or anything, but I know a guy who actually had a literal hernia. He eventually got booted out, never did a deployment or anything, but they still allowed him in. There's another guy who had a walking issue, which is very, very weird because it MEPS, the feet, is really the special thing to take a look at, because obviously you got to do a lot of marching when you join the military. But the thing that really got me was the fact that they were pretty much just taking anybody. Imagine what happens when the draft comes around. They're not going to care about your made-up mental illnesses. They're not going to care about your made-up genders. They're not going to care about that at all. They're going to pluck you anyways. So keep talking crap. I'm going to get on a tangent, but the absurdity of the ceasefire crowd, it extends even further when somebody puts up a tweet that says, why does the United States not have its own Iron Dome? And my response to that is very simple. You obviously don't know anything about anything, because the United States does have its own Iron Dome. It's called the U.S. Air Force. That's our major deterrent against nuclear strikes. If you had a brain, you would know that. The other idiot who basically says, how is it that Israel can shoot down drones and whatnot, but can't shoot down soldiers coming out of the sky? Well, partly because, let's just say the intel at the time was a little bit shoddier, number one. Number two, you don't fire rockets at idiots jumping out of the sky. You use ammo. All right, I just figured I'd point that out there, okay? There's not exactly a very, very bright take. Also, it's easier to get men in than weapons. I know that the second piece of what I said may have sounded dumb too, but it's almost like the equivalent of somebody running their mouth about a situation that they quite frankly don't understand. So therefore, sometimes you actually in kind respond to something that sounds a little bit dumber. But the point is this right here. You don't use 22 LR on nukes, and you don't use 17 HMR on bears. I'm just saying that these are the types of takes that you actually get out there on Twitter. And then you've got this idiot named Jackson Hinkle who runs his mouth doing the whole anti-Israel propaganda crap, which he normally runs his mouth about. By the way, I want to go ahead and say this about Jackson Hinkle too. Very, very bad faith, very, very bad faith guy. And I'm not saying it's because I don't like him or anything, even though obviously I don't like him. But this guy is claiming I'm the most banned guy on YouTube, most banned guy out there. And I just got banned again from another platform. Jackson, you got banned from those platforms back in 2003 or 2002, or you've been running the same shtick basically like the past 5 or 6 years that you've been banned. Donate $3. Oh, Israel's killed over 30,000 and they've not lost a single life, which, by the way, is obviously a bunch of crap when you actually look at the figures from combat, which, by the way, will come out and be made available soon. You'll see that obviously there's a death toll on both sides. Like I said, bad actors who love to take advantage of this situation, like I said before, you can dislike Israel if you want to, but please do yourself a favor. Don't be taken advantage by idiots who want $3 a month. Just don't be taken advantage by them. Meaning that if a nuke is fired, an F-15 or an F-16 will go up in the air and intercept it. That's always been our doctrine against defending ourselves against nukes. I mean, I know that countries like Russia and China, they've got these ballistic missile systems that are designed to shoot down nuclear missiles. But the United States, we have a much, much more cost-effective way of doing it. And, of course, it also gives our pilots a lot more flying time, meaning that they're also being trained. And it also helps them out in dogfights, too. It's actually a pretty good idea, a pretty good system. Yes, I'm very, very much America first, but I'm also a veteran, and I also understand the military capabilities. And, by the way, I'm also very, very pro-military industrial complex if actually used correctly. I think you need to actually study up on U.S. military doctrine and how it is that we do things versus other countries, Tim. I'm saying your name, not talking about Tim Pool, not talking about the beanie guy. I'm talking about this idiot that is now getting big who asked the question. Maybe you should actually study the doctrine first, and you'll realize that we kind of already have our own Iron Dome. Whereas Israel, on the other hand, is a nation that is surrounded by enemies. Hamas, Hezbollah. Jordan is friendly right now. Saudi Arabia is friendly right now, but they weren't always friendly. Kuwait was not always friendly. Iraq has always had an issue. Iran. I mean, basically everybody in that region hates that country. It's kind of part of the reason why it is that I'm pro-Israel, is because they're kind of the underdog. Just saying. I mean, we're not surrounded by enemies here. I mean, we do have enemies, yes, but we don't live right next door to them. Unless, of course, you're conservative living next to a liberal, which, by the way, you need to kind of brush up on, so that way you kind of know what the hell is going on, dude. I'm just responding to this asshole. What happens as a result of this? Well, what probably happens is that this war turns into yet another proxy war. The truth be told is that Iran and Israel have been at war with us for a very long time. You could argue that it goes all the way back to the Balfour Declaration in 1947, 1948. You can argue that all you want. The truth be told is these guys have been at it for a very long time, and sooner or later they were going to fight. As far as the U.S. involvement is concerned, I don't see us actually putting troops on the ground. So the World War III crowd there, I think maybe you might want to stop. But clearly, the Biden administration is pretty damn weak, and of course, Trump should have stayed in office. I've said this on multiple occasions. If Trump was in office, this right here would not be going on. When you've got his voters now screaming Genocide Joe, which, by the way, is the Trump of the left, that right there means there's obviously a swing that's gone over to Trump, and obviously, starting a war is not going to change that. Starting a war to get reelected has never been a good idea, and I can already hear somebody say, well, wartime presidents get reelected. Let's talk about wartime presidents very, very quickly. And I'll bring it up again in part 2, which is going to be the more political aspect of it. When George W. Bush got reelected in 2004, the Iraq War had been going on for over a year. Okay? They chose to keep Bush in office because nobody trusted John Kerry. I actually, even though I'm not the biggest fan of George W. Bush, agree with that move. I would never vote for somebody like Kerry anyways. All right? When Vietnam was going on, the sitting president was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Well, he chose not to seek another term, and Richard Nixon, the Republican, got elected. What I'm saying is that the voters chose the non-incumbent candidate. The incumbent candidate was actually the Vice President, Hubert Humphrey, who was still sitting in office with Johnson at the time, even though he was VP. He didn't get elected. So y'all need to go ahead and can it with that BS right now. The case of FDR, okay? FDR got elected in 1940 for his third term, but the United States had not gotten involved in World War II until late 1941. That was an actual declaration occurred, and troops didn't start getting dispersed until sometime in 1942. So to all the people who were saying he's doing this to get reelected, stop it right now. If anything, this situation would actually be a massive rebuke of the current administration, and I'm also not too sure with the way things are going that the current uniparty establishment would want to keep Biden in office. I'm just throwing it out there because the current uniparty establishment can influence the votes, but they can't actually fully implement the policy if they have someone like Biden in charge. Same thing with Obama, same thing with Bush, same thing with Trump. Just the way that it is. We'll do a deep state video at a later date showing exactly what they can and cannot do. The point is this right here. This situation right here was bound to happen. You can blame whatever side that you want, but I don't see the United States getting involved, and a lot of that's because Biden, of course, is bound to politics, meaning he's bound to a very, very small voter base up in the state of Michigan, up in the state of Wisconsin, that controls his election chances. With that right there being said, guys, there's going to be a part 2 to this video coming out on Thursday. It's going to focus more on the political aspect of it and what's actually going on or what's been happening since. So make sure you guys stick around for that. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please share the video. Please also leave a comment in the comment section. I want to hear what you guys have got to say, and I'll see you guys later.